What's up, everybody? It's Ian the Sage, and it's time for your first financial checkup. Most people don't really have a big picture view of their current financial health, and in most cases, they might not even know where to begin. So the idea behind this financial checkup is to essentially give you a place to start and to keep it as simple as possible. Because it's really easy to complicate doing your finances with these like massive Excel spreadsheets with 10 tabs and different graphs. I feel like a lot of people would really appreciate just the bare bones, the basics, something that is the least likely to cause confusion. So I've structured this video around 4 numbers, and I've seen some creators refer to them as the 4 major numbers. Big shout out to Denzel, Napoleon, Rodriguez for kind of inspiring this video. Basically, with these 4 numbers, you're going to be able to get a big picture overview of your finances. You're going to be able to make better decisions on how to allocate your money, and you'll be able to better understand what goals to prioritize. So, what are our 4 major numbers? They are income, expenses, debt, and cash flow. 3 of those probably make rough sense, but let's define them all further. Income. When I say income, we're talking on a monthly basis here. So you want to estimate your monthly income, and I want you to do it after tax. This ensures that we're working with dollars that are actually usable. This is super easy if you're salaried. Basically just check your direct deposit, and if you're paid bi-monthly, you just multiply by 2. If you work hourly, then we got to run some numbers. So take your last 3 months of paychecks and add them up. And you want to divide that number by the total number of paychecks that you used. So most likely you're going to divide by 6, but in some cases, certain months have 3 pay periods, so it could be 7. So what you have now is your average income for 1 pay period. But since we want it monthly, there is one more calculation to run. So you're probably paid every 2 weeks. And like I said, that doesn't always line up with the months. So to be completely accurate, you want to multiply that number by 26 and then divide by 12. That is your monthly income if you're paid on an hourly basis. And if you have side income, other odd jobs, just do your best to estimate. You want to be accurate, but at the same time, don't overthink it. It's your first checkup after all. Expenses. Now, this is the meat of the work that you're gonna have to do. I'm not asking y'all to be like me. I've input literally all my expenses in an Excel spreadsheet since 2021 when I moved out for the first time. I only ask that you do it for 1 month. So pick one. You want it to be a month that you consider to be like an average month of expenses. So for example, don't pick a month that you were on vacation. Don't pick a month where you miraculously spent very little. And also don't pick February. That's cheating. It should be a relatively normal month of expenses. So you don't have to categorize your expenses, but feel free to if you want. It actually might help you later in the video if you ever want to figure out how to save money. For now though, we want the total number. So your focus should be making sure you don't leave out any source of expenses. That means check every bank account, every credit card, Venmo. Make sure not to double count your Venmo transactions because that also might show up on your checking account. And cash. I know a lot of y'all are like, spending cash doesn't count. And I agree a little bit, but not in this context. So just give it your best estimate and honestly just go off memory. So once you have your total spend for 1 month, we can move on to debt. So this is your total debt balance. We want all of it. Every student loan, car loan, credit card balance, afterpay purchase. I'm kidding, don't do afterpay. Really, it's any outstanding balance that is in your name that also has an interest rate associated with it. And let me clarify, for credit cards, I'm not talking about your credit limit, which is basically the maximum you're able to spend on that card. I'm saying if you have an outstanding balance on that card, that's what we're counting. So I'd recommend to structure it this way. You want to compile a list of every balance and then also every interest rate. And that definitely helps later for analyzing goals and how you want to use your money. And also don't forget to calculate that total balance of all your debt. And finally is cash flow. So this one is the easiest to calculate, but it's also the number where you might not know what it means. Basically, your cash flow is telling you how much money is moving in and out of your accounts every single month. So basically, if your cash flow is positive, then you are earning more than you're spending. And vice versa, if your cash flow is negative, then you're spending more than you're earning. And the idea obviously is to have a positive cash flow. And you may have guessed how to calculate this one. It is income minus expenses. And lucky for you, we already calculated these. So once you calculated this, now we have your monthly cash flow. So now that we have these 4 major numbers, what we can do now is take a step back and see what we can discern about your current financial state. And we can also start to plan out what actions to take. So in particular, it really comes down to what that cash flow number is. Some of you might be looking at a positive cash flow and others might be looking at a negative cash flow. So naturally, there's very different directions that we can go when it comes to taking action. So let's start with the positive. The reason I'm starting off with positive cash flow is that I want anyone who has a negative cash flow to see what they can do too, because you can all do it. Might just take a little discipline and consistency on the expenses side when it comes to saving more money or spending less, and maybe some hard work and upskilling when it comes to the income side and making more money. But for now, let's see what we can do with the positive cash flow. If your cash flow is positive, that's great. The idea is that you have that amount of money every single month to allocate somewhere. And so now we got to figure out how you want to use it. And there's many different directions that you can go. First idea could be using that money to make extra payments on any outstanding debt that you have. This one is great, especially if you have any sort of high interest rate debt, like a credit card, for example. Basically, the quicker that you can get those high interest rate debts paid off, the less you're going to pay overall in interest over time. In other words, you're going to save more money. I won't go into detail, but the general strategy that I recommend is to prioritize making any sort of extra payments on your highest interest rate debt first. This strategy is always going to save you the most money overall. Second idea is to start or to continue to build up an emergency fund. This is great for financial security, and it can also give you like a great deal of mental and emotional stability in your life. Like in my case, it's great knowing that I have this cushion of 6+ months of expenses that I can basically tap into if anything unforeseen happens. And the cool thing is that you've already calculated your monthly expenses. So the legwork is done. You just got to multiply that number by however many months that you want to save up. So I'd recommend at the beginning to shoot for a 3-month emergency fund. I think this is a very balanced goal that's achievable for just about everyone. And if you're looking for where to store this fund as you continue to build it up, I'd recommend putting the money in a high yield savings account. And that's just going to make sure that that money is earning a decent rate and that the value of it is not really degrading due to inflation. And the third direction you can go in is investing. And now, yeah, this is definitely the flashiest of the 3 options, but I gotta recommend if you have any sort of outstanding debt or if you don't have an emergency fund yet, I honestly don't think it's worth your time investing yet. That's just my opinion. Yes, it's fun, and yes, it can definitely be flashy on the surface, but true investing, like long-term investing, is very, very unflashy. Like my investing strategy is just to buy the same index fund every single month. And that's it, it's simple because it works. But if we're talking about like what's really gonna pull the biggest levers in your life from a financial standpoint, the best things that you can do for yourself first are to pay off any sort of debts, especially the high interest rate ones, and to build up that emergency fund. I would say once you do that, then it's time to invest. But in my opinion, the other things are going to have a greater immediate impact on your financial health. Because the idea with investing is that ideally, you don't want to touch this money for at least like 5 to 10 years. And that's really only if you're saving for like a medium-term goal. So like a wedding or like a down payment on a house. In most cases, the money that you're putting in, that's like your nest egg. You want to give that as much time as possible to grow. Because the idea is that you eventually want to live off that, retire off that. Maybe even early. If you've done all that, then here are some tips for investing. Actually, first off, I am not a financial advisor, so this is not advice. This is simply what I do. So some tips that I put into effect that I am not advising that you do are as follows. So I pick an index fund, one that tracks the S&P 500, and that's just the 500 largest US stocks. An index fund basically groups that all into one investment. So if you buy the index, in a sense, you're buying like all 500 stocks. And I do this because it's diversified, so it spreads out any risk. And there's many S&P index funds, but the one I go with is VOO. That's because it has the lowest expense ratio. And every fund has an expense ratio. It's basically what they charge to keep the fund up and running. So every month I buy a set amount of VOO, either in my Roth IRA or in a brokerage account. And that's it, it's mad simple. So now you know what some of your options are if you got a positive cash flow, but what if that's not the case? So your cash flow is negative, which means that you're bringing in less money than you're spending. Basically, you're in the hole. And when this is the case for people, especially over the long term, they may resort to other methods on how to get by. So for example, like putting your expenses on a credit card when you don't really have the means to pay that off. So the idea is we want to figure out how to get you out of the hole. And you can do this in 2 ways. So one is spending less and the other one is earning more. Now, to be fair, I don't necessarily feel qualified yet on giving you advice on how to earn more. Definitely more well-versed to give tips on how to spend less. But here's what's worked for me in various points in my life. So when I worked service jobs in college, I took certain opportunities to either take other people's shifts or really more often than not, just stay 1 to 2 hours later and take the back portion of their shift. This added up over time and it wasn't too strenuous. I've also tried some roundabout side hustles to make extra money. Like for example, I did some medical studies in my area. And for my salary jobs, it was really a matter of just negotiating once the job offer was given to me. My tip here is to never settle for the first number that they give you. you always want to rebuttal back. And for this, I'd get familiar with what the average pay range is for that job in your area. And the last thing I did was just continue to learn and upskill. So after college, even though I'm in finance, I took some courses on data analytics. And I developed this case study piece and then linked that within my resume. And I feel like that really set me apart in my second job search after college. So now the other side of the coin is spending less. And the great thing is, if you followed along in this video, then you already know what your monthly spend is. And if you haven't categorized those expenses yet, now would be a good time to do so. And a simple way to go about this is just breaking up those expenses into wants and needs. So a need would be like rent, utilities, groceries. Wants would be like restaurants, entertainment, apparel, stuff like that. So we want to first hone in on your wants and figure out which ones you want to continue to prioritize. And at the same time, figure out which ones you may want to cut down on or fully cut out. And if you're still not satisfied, then you could also look at your needs and see if there's any money you're leaving on the table. Like for example, you could buy groceries more in bulk to save more money. And with these strategies, obviously the goal is to at least be treading water. Treading water is just spending the exact same amount as you're earning. And that would put your cash flow at exactly 0. If you can hit that, then at least you know that you're now out of the hole. And then you can focus on maybe earning more to have a positive cash flow. So that was negative cash flow. It's not a one-size-fits-all method because everybody's different. But hopefully you could take some useful tips from it. I believe in you. So now you're done with your first financial checkup. So hopefully now you have a strong, big picture view of your current financial state. The cool thing is you can come back to this video down the road and run another checkup on yourself. I do this every few months out of curiosity just to kind of see where I'm at. And now you can too. This is Ian the Sage. I make personal finance content for college kids and for 20-somethings. And I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe if you found this helpful, and I'll catch you all in the next video.